is good, so I need to stick to English, so next year I hope to be better. Thank you for the introduction, first of all, and as my fourth speaker, this presentation will probably also be different because it will only depend partly on IT, but it shows that IT is the major part to change the way healthcare will be delivered in the future, and is partly being already delivered today. The new concept is called coordinated care. It might seem not too new, but I will show you that it is definitely new. And I also promise you not a lot of marketing. So I just wanted to introduce my company, CSC. We have over 90,000 employees globally, and we have a turnover of 16 billion US dollars, so quite a large company. We are focused on consulting and solution integration. We have clients from the public sector, from healthcare, from financial services, from manufacturing, diversified. And our topics are basically everything that has to do with IT to be very high level. And that was already it in terms of marketing. In terms of coordinated care, what I want to tell you before I really go into the slides is what you find today in terms of healthcare systems globally. You definitely find three different types of systems. And if I talk about healthcare systems, I talk about countries. So on the healthcare system side today, you have one system that's called Bismarck system, which is like the German system and even the Slovak system. And you have the Beveridge system, which is the UK, which is the National Health Service. And you have a privately financed system, which is the US, basically. So while the financing, the regulation, and how you deliver healthcare in these three systems is completely different, because they are nationally funded and socially funded and some are privately funded. The problems that these systems have are basically the same. It's an aging population, it's demographic shift, it's chronic diseases, it's cost pressures, and so on and so forth. So by having the same problems, what the systems are doing, they are borrowing solutions from other systems that worked. And by doing so, they are getting more alike. So at the very end, and this is important for the IT business, is even though healthcare still needs some customization and focus on the region, to some degree it is getting more alike, and we can target different countries with the same solutions because they are all having the same problems and reacting to these problems the same way. And we are already on the slide that I want to show you later, but that's fine. So the major trend that we see today is that we are shifting the way how healthcare is delivered from being very reactive to being proactive. So we're not waiting until something happened. We want to try to start thinking of what could happen and then do prevention up front. So the past showed that most of the attempts to make healthcare better ended in silos. So one silo is the hospital system. So if you look at the hospital system and try to reduce costs in the hospital, what will you do? You try to reduce lengths of stay. So you try to release the patient earlier from hospital so he's not causing any money. If you do that to a certain extent, this will have the adverse effect because you will relieve them and he will come back due to the same diagnosis after a couple of days. Because you did not really treat him well and he was not cured when he left the hospital. In some countries you have penalties, so if you're coming back to the hospital with the same disease and the same diagnosis, the hospital gets penalties to pay because he didn't care or she didn't care for the patient the way how the hospital should have done it. So if you go one step lower and look at the various challenges you have globally today, and this applies to Slovakia as it will apply to Germany or the US or the UK, it's the data is not there. The GP does not know what is happening in the hospital and does not know what happened in rehabilitation. There are no standards. We have, I'm from Germany, so in Germany, in the outpatient sector, we have 400 different standards in terms of interfaces. No one is really kind of looking at the continuum of care. No one really takes accountability to get the patient cured in time. It's just siloed way of delivering care, and this is something that needs to change, that is changing, by coordinating the different players within the healthcare industry. So if you want to address goals, and I just mentioned a couple of them on here, you need to address the care continuum, so the way how a patient travels on his pathology pathway through the system. So the patient is with the doctor, then with the hospital, then in rehabilitation, then back to the doctor, and so on. So you need to have a patient-centered view on how you deliver healthcare in the future. And unfortunately, to do this, IT is only one part. It is the major enabling part, because we need a data infrastructure that we do our care on and where the processes are running on, but it's only one part, because the other two parts that we need to do care the right way in the future is also having subject matter expertise, knowing what disease management pathways we want to implement, what governance structure do we need, who needs to be incentivized to do what on this coordinated care pathway to get the best outcome for the patient. And then of course there's change management, because we are changing the way how care is delivered in the future. So we need to take the people with us. Next slide. So what we see in healthcare is what is called the triple aim. And unfortunately, not we from CEC developed this term. This was basically developed by Donald Burbeck. He is probably the most known healthcare economist in the US. And the triple aim says, there are three major things you should, as a system, as a ministry, as an authority, as a municipality, focus on. And this is patient care quality, so quality and outcome of care. The second thing is cost reduction. Yeah, we should be looking at the cost and not spend too much, because we are wasting money by doing double diagnosis and so on and so forth. And the third thing is look at the overall picture. So a patient is important, definitely, but the patient is only one in a larger population of people living in an area. So you should have the population help in your goals as well, because only making one better will not make all the others better. So you should have a broader view on how you look at patients in the future. If you go to the next slide and then say, okay, so what do I need to do to focus on this triple aim? Then you definitely need to shift from reactive care to planned care, as I mentioned. You need to engage the patient on the pathway. If the patient is not engaged, he will not do what you want him to do and will not get better. 40%, by the way, of getting someone cured is based on engagement of the patient. You need to assess the readmissions you have and why this is happening in order to increase the quality. So if you are able to increase the quality by the means I just mentioned, then the next thing you should do is to focus on the health status of the whole population. So you need to add specific analytics to identify what person need the right care. So not everyone should get all the care that is possible, because then you will spend too much money again. So you need to identify what patients are eligible for what care, which includes analytics, prediction, and so on and so forth. Of course, you also need to deliver care at the right care setting and so on. You should, whatever you can do, you should do in an outpatient sector without doing it in an inpatient sector, because you will spend more money and so on and so forth. So if you did the first two right, you already end up in reducing the costs, because you do something differently than you did before. And if you want to do it even better, then you should focus on the cost piece and say, we probably need to think about different business models going forward, because at the very end, someone needs to pay for it. And that's me coming from an industry, the biggest pain point we have. So in future you will find risk adjustment or benefit share models in healthcare going forward, because you need to engage someone and pay them to do something differently in the future. If you look at the next slide, and this slide shows you that I'm not telling you some theory, that this is basically happening today globally. So in the US, this concept is called Accountable Care Organization. It's based on the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. It is installing an institution that is accountable to deliver care in a specific region. We have the same thing in Germany. They are called management companies. So there is a company managing the population health in a specific area. In the UK, it's the GP Commissioning Consortia. In France, it's the Agence Régionale de Santé, and what have you. So Spain, there's an Azira model driven by hospitals, and in the Middle East, we have the Wakaya disease management in Abu Dhabi that I personally implemented. So it's basically a concept that you already find today being applied globally. I don't want to bother you with this slide. I just want to show you that every one of these initiatives, and there are just a couple that I mentioned, and there are way more, and even in Slovakia and in Czech, there are these examples existing today. What I want to show you with this slide, that every example has a specific mission and vision. There are goals that they want to achieve, that there is a strategy how we want to achieve the goals, and that there are instruments. Again, these instruments are not only IT, so it's not only having an health information exchange, an electronic health record, and so on. It is also having processes on top of this infrastructure that will be, workflow, clinical pathways, and so on, that will, at the very end will make, the healthcare you are delivering better and achieving the goal, which is curing the patient earlier and probably with less cost. So better quality at less cost is something that is achievable. And because I wanted to focus on the achievements I just mentioned, I just wanted to highlight some of the achievements that have been done by these initiatives. And if you go back to this AAA, cost, quality, and health status, what we see today in the quality space is that the morbidity and mortality are reduced 20 to 30%. So meaning patients are healthier than before and are less dying. At the same time, you reduce costs by 15%. So taking out waste, meaning double diagnosis and so on and so forth. On the other hand, also arresting patient at an earlier stage of the pathology. So these patients will not get as sick as they normally would have gotten, and therefore they are not spending so much money. And then thirdly, it is about population health, so reduction of readmissions, underutilization, overutilization of healthcare, and so on. Because you can also do some harm to patients if you overutilize what you do with them, because it's treatment they don't need. And if you want to implement this, you need to have a specific setup. So this seems to be very complicated at the first point, but it's not. You have the healthcare, you have the health plan or the payer, so if someone needs to pay for it, that's you have them today as well. You have the provider, so they are providing healthcare, hospitals, GPs, nursing, something we have today. So then you have social and community care, you have life science and pharma, and you have the patient. The patient normally should have been in the middle, but I couldn't manage it with all the arrows, so that patient is on top and a bit bigger, so it has the position it should normally have. So something that is new is the coordinating body I put in the middle of the picture, which is, as I named it, it has different names in different countries. So it's a patient-centered medical home in the US, or an accountable care organization. It's an Agence Régionale in France, it's a management company in Germany, what have you. In Slovakia we have in the first project called Medi Partner, exactly, so Pro-SK. We have the same thing in Shakeland, so it's already here. So it's not a vision or something, we already do it, we just need to professionalize this. So this coordinating body, what this is basically doing is three things. First of all, it needs to identify the people who are eligible for the right care, so that needs to do analytics. It needs to put in place an e-health infrastructure so that the data is flowing between the GPs, the hospitals, the patients, and the nursing homes. And it needs to be, it needs to do the care management piece, the disease management. So basically putting the right pathways in place, the right organizational design, the government structure, the incentive schemes, and so on to get everyone aligned. You don't need to do this all at once. And this is an example from Germany, from a health insurance in Berlin. And they started 3 years ago, making up their minds about, how should processes look like between us as the payer, the providers, and also the social and community care. So they design processes between the three different institutions. And as a second step, they put in an e-health infrastructure that enabled the flow of data between GPs, hospitals, nursing, and the payer. So giving the payer the chance to intervene with how care is delivered. And at the third stage then, they founded a management company, so a coordinating body that took over the disease management and is now managing diseases, chronic diseases like diabetes, coronary heart failure, COPD, for that payer. So if you go to the next slide, we invented a model, it's called Global Coordinated Care Adoption Model, that is showing that we can identify on which stage on the journey you are. So I told you that the example about the payer in Germany, there were 3 stages. So that you could be at a stage that's even earlier or later. And we can identify that, identifying different levels of where you are in terms of readiness to address coordinated care in the setup that you're doing or that you should do in the future. If you apply this to Eastern Europe, especially to Slovakia, there are some rules you should follow to be able to implement that here. And I just want to highlight the first two ones. And this is something we are discussing, and it's something we are discussing with some authorities over here already. And this is the coordinated care does not interfere with any of the existing systems. So no one needs to be afraid that we are taking something away from them. It is a system that you can put in place complementarily. And the second one is everyone can join the system, so we are not excluding anyone, which is some fear some of the countries and ministries have today. So if you look at the two rules and see how you would kind of implement them in Slovakia, you basically have three levels where you can start. You can start at the country level, you can start at the intersectoral level, how we call it, or you can start at the individual level, so at the level of a corporation, basically. The good thing is, as I mentioned, no one is included, and we can start at either level depending on who is willing to go that road. So you can start at the Ministry of Finance or of Health at the very highest level. You can start with the SIA, or with the Social Insurance Agency on the let's say intercorporate level, or you can start with specific hospitals who are willing to go that route. So no matter where you start, every point is a starting point. And to be even more specific, we have two examples, and then I'm finished for Slovakia. One is the reduction of costs for sick leave. Today, SIA tells us that they are spending 300 million euros on sick leave costs a year, with an average leave of 50 days. If we can reduce this by 1 day, we save almost 6 million euros a year. So this is really a target that we should look at, and you can argue, why is that not working today if that's a big amount of money? The thing is that today the participants who should work together are not coordinated. So everyone is doing their job without looking at the other. So no one is really looking at the continuum of care. The doctor says, okay, the guy is sick, that's fine. The employer says, oh, he's sick, so I'm not doing anything about it. So it's not coordinated. So you need someone who takes responsibility to coordinate it, to address the potential of 6 million per day that you are able to save if these guys are working together in a collaborative way. A second example that's completely different, and this addresses an issue or a topic that we see today within Slovakia, is that investment funds are out there and by basically trying to beef up their portfolio. So they are buying hospitals and pharmacies and life science companies, whatever. The thing is, they are only buying these institutions, and that's it. But they could basically improve profit if they would kind of enforce the coordination among the different providers that they are buying, due to the fact that this will enable you different revenue streams. So this is something that is not really looked upon today, and that should be forced basically going forward. So that was about it. As I mentioned, it will be quite different than the rest of the Congress. Not too much technology focused, but I want to show you that technology is the main enabler of delivering this new kind of healthcare going forward. Thank you.